Hello, my lovelies. How are you today? So I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well. We're together. How could it possibly be anything but good, right? Right. So I want to thank you for joining me today in our discussion. For those of you that are new, my name is Erin, and today we'll be discussing the IDchannel's Evil Lives Here, Season 3, Episode 4, titled The Black Widow. This episode originally aired on January 22nd, 2018. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and if you do, please like and share and check out some of the other episodes I've posted in the past. Excuse me, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. For those of you that are my regulars, welcome back. It's always great to have you with me. I cannot thank you enough for your support and encouragement and the words you send me, either commented or private message. You guys, it means the world to me. I'm hoping to build this channel, doing many different things, trying to find that right little niche that we all like and love and get it all figured out. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you again for joining me, and we can just jump right into it. So I am happy to say that this episode is not the same as the last couple that we've been watching. This one is different, and it's nice. I mean, it's really nice to have a little bit of difference, because I think I've talked with a couple of you. The last couple episodes in this series have all been pretty much the same, and it's been very hard to get over watching it and discussing it when you're hearing the same content, I guess. I mean, obviously each story is different because it wouldn't be in the series otherwise, but the crux of it has all been the same. So it's nice to get something different. And the title, The Black Widow, should tell us a little bit about what we're getting into. I will say I had heard of this before. I think I had watched a podcast, or not watched, I'd listened to a podcast before. But my biggest problem is when I'm listening to the podcast, I'm usually doing a ton of different things, and I assume all of us are the same. We put it on to listen to, but we're only paying attention with half an ear, and that is the case in this situation. So I was familiar with it, I knew a little bit about it, but I didn't know the whole story. And yeah, this is a wild one, so I think we can just jump right in. So we start the episode hearing from Cindy. Cindy Taylor is her name, and she is talking about her mother, Blanche, which her full name, which I only say this because it's mentioned numerous times throughout, but her full name is Blanche Kiser Taylor Moore. So some things I saw Blanche Taylor, some things I saw Blanche Moore, but I'm going to call her Blanche. It's just a little bit easier, obviously. And her dad, Cindy's dad's name is James. So those are who we're talking about. And we start the video with a court trial, which is always so fun when we do that. And I did not bring a mirror. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. I was obviously not prepared. But okay, so starts the video with a court trial, and Blanche is on trial, and the jury has convicted her to a sentence of death. So Cindy says, I'm pretty sure, or I was pretty sure at that time, that they were going to convict her, find her guilty. She said, but I was really hoping that they wouldn't give her the death penalty. She said, but when the judge said, and I quote, may God have mercy on her soul, end quote, she said the whole situation really hit her as real. Now, before we really get in, I want to say we see a lot of Cindy and her sister in videos at the time. And I know she has to be cringing at these because this is pure late 80s, 90s videos. We've all been there. Well, maybe not all of us. I'm a little older than some of you. So let's just say we've mostly been there with the big, bouffant hair and the clothes. Oh my God, the clothes. And love Cindy's heart and her sister, which they never mentioned her sister's name. And I don't know what it is. She wasn't part of this video. And, in all of my research after, I didn't look. So she obviously wasn't on for a reason, and I respected that. But I'm sure both of them seeing these videos, because there's quite a few videos. They did quite a few interviews. They were convinced their mother was innocent. And it wasn't until the very end where I think she had started really understanding what was going on. She says, I loved my mom. I thought she was innocent through the whole thing. My mom would not lie to me. But she says it really hurts to look back and realize that there was another side to her mother that she never knew. So, and yes, she even says at one time there was probably a lot of clues that what was going on that I didn't pick up on. She says, I see them now. I get that. I mean, come on. Most of us can say that we don't notice maybe some of the most obvious things that happen in our life until after. I mean, that saying, there's that saying, I can't even remember what it is right now. It's about 20/20 vision, but guys, I'm sorry, I can't think of it, but you know what I'm saying. I'm sure you do, because our vision looking back is always 20/20. It's basically what that saying is saying. And in this case, she's looking back and she's like, yeah, there was a lot of signs I did miss. So we'll talk about her throughout. This is Blanche's story, though, that she's telling us. So Blanche tells us that she grew up in a Christian home with good Christian values. And she even has Blanche's daily devotional. She said Blanche carried this with her every day. She worked out of it, read out of it daily. She read her Bible every day. She said they blessed every meal that they ate. And she said it was just they went to church, the whole 9 yards. She said it was a very spiritual home. But she said, since then people have asked her, how can you come from such a spiritual home and Blanche do such evil things? And I don't think there's really an answer to that, because Cindy's also, saying yet again, it's scary to think that she lived her whole life with this woman and she didn't know her. So she tells us that Blanche was not an overly affectionate person, especially to her father. She never says really if she wasn't affectionate to her and her sisters. It never really gets there, but she says to her father, she said, she said, and I quote, he loved her more than she loved him, end quote. She said, he was always trying to hug her or kiss her or whatever, and she would just kind of push him off and just say she didn't have time for this or whatever. And, Cindy said growing up, it's all she saw. And she just thought that her mother must not have been the, displays of affection, public displays of affection type of person. And I get that. I'm not. Very rarely will you see my husband and I all lovey-dovey on top of each other out in public. That's just not who we are. So I can see where that might be like, I didn't think anything of it. Mom just wasn't, overly affectionate in public. So, I mean, I know my kids don't necessarily think that their father and I are any specific kind of way, because we don't show that. But, I mean, I don't know. I know a lot of people that are. I know I have family members that are very openly displayed. So it's to each person. So I can understand my point. I can understand where she's saying she didn't really think anything of it, other than she figured she really thought her dad probably loved her mom more than her mom loved her dad, which is very sad to think about. But again, probably not uncommon, because I think in a lot of relationships, there's one person that probably loves the other one a little bit more. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it's probably more common than any of us want to admit. And that's the case. She does tell us her mother was a very beautiful woman. And she loved being a woman. So she loved the feminine things. And She never left her house. I shouldn't probably talk with my hand in front of my mouth. She never left her house without makeup on, without her dressed on. I think Cindy said that she was always dolled up when she left. So, what she portrayed inside with her husband was not necessarily how she acted outside, because outside she loved the attention. So she just ate that kind of attention up. And they even said that to a point it was an actual problem for James. She said, especially like at church. So she says, you know, when I went to church, there was still ushers. That when you come in, they would usher you to a seat. And she said when her mom come in, she said all the men fought over. Who's going to take Blanche? I got Blanche. You got Blanche last week. Blah, 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 blah. So she said, and it caused a problem with her dad. Her dad did not like it. You know, and I think she even said that there was a comment once that one of the guys told James that his wife caused more arguments between families, or between the ushers' families. So, I mean, yeah, that's kind of just sad, because outside, her mom was very personable, open, friendly. She would use these terms quite often to express her. She would use these adjectives a lot to describe her mother. But in the house, which is her and her husband, she was the opposite. She did not like that attention. She did not want that attention from him. And yeah, I can see that being a huge issue among the family. But again, I guess Cindy said she noticed it, and she noticed that her parents disagreed and argued over it, but she said she thought it was just a normal disagreement. She never really thought anything felt out of normal with these arguments between her parents, because for one, they didn't argue often, apparently, and when they did, it was very quiet and kept amongst themselves. So they didn't include the children, which I think is how it should always be. I don't think children should be brought in, dragged in, or included in adult arguments. But she said, you know, they showed a happy family. They raised their children. They kept a good house. You know, she said they did everything that you would think when you think of good parents. So she never questioned it. She never thought anything different, anything wrong with what was going on with her family. But then she said one day her dad got sick, and he became very sick. So she said her mother doted on him, said that she was right by his side the whole time. You know, and it shows the reenactment that he's at home in bed, and Blanche is right there the whole time with him. She's, you know, she's taking him to the doctor. She's doing whatever the doctor tells her to. She's cooking for him, making sure he's eating. You know, that whole, what should be expected, right? I mean, I've done that for my husband. My husband's done that for me. It's what should be expected when your spouse is sick. So she made a really big deal about it, though. And I'm like, kind of odd, in my opinion, because there shouldn't have been anything that wasn't expected. But however, she says her mother was a great cook, and her dad absolutely loved her cooking. And she said it actually was to the point where he wasn't eating anything unless she cooked it and helped him eat. So, there's that. This is thicker than I thought it was. Okay. But, she said when he first started feeling sick, you know, it's just like the yuckies we all get, right? But then he got a really bad sore throat. And the doctor told him, excuse me, he had the flu. Not uncommon, you know. Yeah, I could see why they would, you know, not question that. But she said in his 30s, he had a heart attack. And she said, you know, the doctor told them, not her, that any kind of little flu or cold or whatever could really put some undue stress on his heart. So, you know, to take it easy, to whatever. So she didn't really think anything out of the normal, right? Dad was sick. Doctor said he had the flu. Mom's taking care of him. Whatever. But then one morning, his alarm apparently went off, which I didn't understand that, because if you're sick in bed, why is your alarm on? But that's beside the point, unless it was like for medicine. But his alarm went off, and he wouldn't turn it off. So Cindy said she just had this awful, awful feeling. And she got her mom, told her mom that Daddy's alarm was going off, and he's not turning it off. And Blanche went in to check on him, and they found him dead. So Cindy goes on for a while to talk about what a good man he was, and something's not reacting well with the makeup. But she talks about what a good man he was, and a loving father, and whatever. She said doctors claimed he had a massive heart attack. He died quickly. He didn't know what happened. And we learned that he was only 44 when he died. So Cindy is telling us that she was traumatized after her father's death. I get that. And she said that she just couldn't even make herself go back home. So she, you know, went and stayed. I don't know if it was another relative, it was a friend. I think she said friend. I really don't quite remember. But she stayed for weeks before she went home. She said she just had this overwhelming sense of dread about going home. So she said she didn't know why. She said she just did not want to go home. So finally she did, and it was about Thanksgiving. And she found out that it didn't take her mother very long to do two things. One, she got rid of all her husband's belongings. Everything went out. There was no clothes. There was, you know, nothing left of James in the house. And number two, she started bringing another man around. So when Cindy went home at Thanksgiving, said that was the first holiday after her daddy's death. She said, and it was a very awkward, you know, time because Raymond was there. And she said she had a lot of mixed emotions over this. She said she really resented him being there too, which, yeah, I think just about any of us would be the same. I mean, am I wrong? I don't think I'm wrong. But she said, but Blanche kept telling her that her and Raymond were only friends, and they had worked together. They knew each other for years, and that was all that was. And he didn't have anywhere to go for Thanksgiving, whatever. But Cindy said, you know, it was only 7 weeks after her daddy died that Raymond was now sitting at the table in his spot. Yeah. So Blanche kept downplaying this relationship with Raymond, but it became the point where they had standing dates. So every Monday night she went out with him, and, you know, she went out a lot. I said that really weird. She went out a lot with him, and to the point, Cindy said, you know, I was 16 at the time, and Mom was going out more than I was. And they even started taking vacations together, right? So, I don't know about you all, but that's clear signs that there's something going on, right? But she was keeping it down low. She didn't want to admit to anything. Everything was a secret, which personally, I think is probably for a couple of reasons. One, it was only a few short weeks since her husband died, right? So, yeah, she's going to want to keep this on the down low because it makes her look really bad. And it made me question, since that moved as fast as it did, was she having an affair with him while she was working? There's some questions there. But Cindy says that she noticed again that her mom was very offstandish. There was no public displays of affection. Like they showed this video of Raymond trying to hold her hand, and she wouldn't hold his hand. And, you know, she's just back to doing that. So, I find it interesting. And it does make... Okay, so what I find now is very interesting. And kind of makes sense to the story when we really get into it. And I say that as when you start looking at things in this light, it makes a lot of sense. So, Blanche and Raymond dated for 17 years. It's a pretty good time, ain't it? She was married to James for 22. So there are significant amounts of time that she's having these relationships. And that's just a lot of time in between to kind of make any suspicions like disappear, right? When you're with somebody that long, yeah. So, they did that 17 years of they're not dating, they are dating, they're not dating, whatever. And it's no wonder no one thought that she had done anything to these men because of the time. However, I want to get back to the story because we learned that they're 17 years into the relationship when another suitor appears. So this guy's name is Dwight, and he's got a shady past. He's a pastor, so he's a preacher with a shady past. There was rumors that, and I don't know if these were true or not, I'm just telling you what is stated in this show, but he, at his last church, started having an affair with his secretary and ended up having to leave. So, there's Mr. Dwight. And he started showing up visiting Blanche. And Cindy says at first it was just like every couple weeks he'd be there. Then it was every week he was there. And then it was like every couple days. And then it was every day. So, this dude's progression was real. And Cindy said it was very obvious that he was pursuing her. And I'm like, honey, yeah. That's pretty obvious. But, in my opinion, and this probably isn't everyone's opinion, and I mean no offense, but the dude probably kept coming around because he was getting some encouragement. I mean, rejection is a lonely bedfellow, and if she's telling him that she's in this long-term relationship, remember she's 17 years when he starts coming around, he probably would have stopped coming around. However, he didn't, and the relationship kept whatever. And I think she kept it a secret from Raymond. It's never stated, but it's pretty obvious that she kept this a secret. So, back to Dwight. Cindy says that she started questioning her mother about this because it was just really weird that she is supposed to be in this long-term relationship with Raymond, and now she's got this other guy coming around. And her mother once again did this whole we're just friends route, right? So she won't admit to anything. She won't say there's anything going on. But Cindy says, I'm not dumb. You know, I was young, but I wasn't dumb. And, which, you know what? I don't know how old she was. She was 16 when her mom started really dating Raymond, or at least that's what I figured. So, I mean, if they were done in 17 years, she's probably in her 30s at this point. So, she's an adult. So, yeah, she's not dumb. But she says, you know, I just didn't question her anymore. She said I wasn't going to get an answer. So, she said I just didn't even continue to question it. But, yeah, she said she thought it was weird. She said then one day when she was leaving the house, she ran into Raymond. He was coming in. So, Raymond's still around, right? Raymond is still in the picture, and he's still over at the house to see her. But he stops Cindy, and he asks her to look at something on his neck. And she said, you know, he's asking her what she thought it was. She says, you know, I didn't know. She said it looked like a razor burn. And she told him, she said, it didn't look too serious, right? Well, that seemed kind of odd when she told me that. I'm like, what? Why would you mention this in the story? I don't get it. But later on, after I do some sleuthing, we find out about this. So she said the next thing she knew, Raymond was in the hospital. And he just literally never came out, which it doesn't say here. I do find out, and I will go on and state this because I find it very interesting. He was put in April of that year, and it was October when he died. So he was there a very, very long time. And she said her mother was there with him the whole time. She was at the hospital every day. She was taking him food. She was feeding him. She was even bringing food to the nurses and the doctors for a thank you for how hard they were working on him and getting him to better. And so, yeah. Seeing a trend here. So, after Raymond's death, Cindy said her mother proceeded just like she did with her dad. She got all his stuff out, which she didn't have a lot there. They weren't living together. They weren't married. But she got everything out that was his in the house and moved the new guy in. So now Cindy tells us that her mother is spending a lot of time with Dwight, and they are being more open about the relationship, right? So for some reason she's not trying to hide it or whatever. I don't know. She just was. And Cindy says, I was really bothered by this relationship with Dwight. Gotta get my names right. And she said, I don't know why, but it really did. And I call that, honey, intuition. We don't have to have a reason why something makes us feel uncomfortable or not right. But we should always listen to it when we have that feeling. So, anyways, she's not comfortable with Dwight. And to be honest, I don't know why. He didn't do anything other than, it's just moving so fast again. And that probably had more to do with it than anything. But I think her intuition probably was more along the lines that there really was something wrong and that her mom was really kind of moving fast. And I think she really thought her poor mom has gone now with 2 lovers, husband and her long-term beau, that are now passed away and dead, and she didn't think anything of it. I mean, honestly, I can't say I don't blame her. I mean, I get it. That many years in between, there was nothing in that other than poor Blanche has now had 2 relationships that have the person has died. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know that there would have been anything that I would have really saw myself that would have made me question anything about these men. So anyways, Dwight was always at the house. She doesn't say Dwight had moved in at this point, but he was always there. And she said he was really touchy, kind of like in high school affection where they got to hang all over each other and, I love you, oh, I love you, blah, blah, blah. She said it was just really reminded her of like a high school thing. And she said, well, this won't last because I know Mom isn't that way. But somehow, some way, I've lost my... Somehow, some way, there it is. Her mom stayed, and, even without being all affectionate, I guess Dwight figured he had enough affection for both of them. I don't know. She said one day they're, she's at the house, and apparently she was at the house a lot. Like I said, I think she was an adult at this time. Not that there's anything wrong. I hope my kids are still at the house when they are, after a certain age. I really do. But she said they were, obviously sitting around doing something. And she looked down and saw that her mom had a ring on her finger. And she's like, Mom, tell me this is not what it looks like. and you are seriously not going to marry him. Like I said, she really didn't like this guy. Again, there's really no reason why she wouldn't have liked it. There was nothing he did, but I think she was starting to probably get some intuition that something was not right with her mother. Anyways, she didn't like him. And whatever it was that she thought was not right with her mother, she blamed on him. Anyways, that's just my opinion. You know, I could be completely wrong. Who knows? But she said her mom's like, no, this is just a promise ring. You know, we're not married. I'm not marrying him, blah, blah, blah. And then she said, yeah, her mom said that, claimed that up until the day she married him. So, yeah. Dwight became, from what I could tell, this was only the second husband. So Dwight became husband number 2 and is the Moore in this. So I said her full name was Blanche Kiser is her maiden name. Taylor is Cindy's dad's name, Moore. So like I said, she didn't marry Raymond. And it's awful pink. Let me do some damage control here. So, yeah. She denied that she was going to marry him up until the day she did, in fact, marry him. I thought that was funny. So, shortly after the marriage, Blanche's attitude started changing. She was not happy living with Dwight. Now, remember, she was living by herself for 17 years when she was with Raymond. They didn't live together, so she didn't have to, like, cater to Raymond's needs and such. And now Blanche was having to do that because she was married, and she was not happy about having to do that. So yeah, she was not happy with all of that. So sorry, I'm trying to work this pink out. So, you know, Cindy is telling her mother, give it time, things will be, I mean, you know, you just got married, things are going to be okay, you just got to work it out, whatever. And it wasn't long after that, dude got sick. And, you know, deja vu, anybody? Yeah. He's sick, and he's in the hospital. And, again, she is spending most of her time with him there. Until, and it doesn't tell us why, I do have to look this up later, but until the police showed up and start questioning some things. Like I said, I really don't think they showed up because of Blanche herself, right? I mean, there was so many years. I just can't even express this enough. There was so many years between, you know, when James died, and then when, what's his name? Raymond died. So I do look into that because I'm like, why? Why are they just now showing up? What was the catalyst, right, that caused this? So we'll get into that. We won't get into it until I do some extra sleuthing, though. But the police show up. Tests are starting to be run. And nobody is allowed back in his room. And Cindy tells us her mom just really became stressed at this time. And she wasn't sure why, but she kept questioning her mother. Is there something we need to know? What's going on? You know, why are you all of a sudden this stressed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So I think Cindy really did have an idea. Something wasn't right, but she was in denial. And I'm not going to blame her for that. I would have been the same in the same situation, because I was no way I would have thought my mother could have done something like that. She didn't. Don't get me wrong, she didn't. But you would have not have been able to convince me that she could do that. So I get it. So now we're at the point where Blanche keeps telling her, no, everything's fine, everything's good. It'll, you know, we'll just have to wait and see what's going on. And, you know, she's trying to convince the girls that everything's fine when in fact nothing was fine. So, Cindy says one day, one of the detectives, and I don't understand this. Again, we'll get into all this, how this happened. But somebody recommended to the doctor they do a heavy metal test on Dwight. And that was how it was discovered there was arsenic in his system. And I keep playing that song and that one line that says, some men can't handle their arsenic. If you know, you know. But that line and that, my daughter and I both, when we were watching it, we're like, so anyways, if you know, you know. And that'll be singing in my head now that I've said it again. So yeah. Cindy says her and her sister were called down to the DA's office to discuss Dwight and Blanche's marriage and the suspicions that they had that Blanche had been poisoning him. So, you know, they go down there and find out that the police thought they had uncovered a long line of poisonings and murders. So now we hear from Vincent Rabel, the assistant district attorney. I guess he still is, or maybe, I don't know, but he's the assistant district attorney, and talking about how when the suspicion started, they started taking Dwight. They started taking Dwight, his urine for testing, and they did this every day for a week. So these tests showed that there was arsenic in his system, and it was different levels of arsenic. So one day might be then, but the next day he's up again, and he's been in the hospital, so he is still receiving arsenic. So that's when they cut everybody off. So they knew somebody in the family had to be poisoning. And Mr. Rabel says, and I quote, that Dwight survived with the largest amount of arsenic ever discovered in a human being in North America who lived to tell about it, end quote. I'm like, damn. He said it was just a miracle that Dwight lived at all. And nobody, even the doctors, can explain how he survived. I guess, you know, he had made up with the good Lord. I don't mean to joke about it, but seriously, you know, he's very fortunate. So, after this, I'm going to finish my makeup and I'll be right back. Okay, so after finding all this arsenic in Dwight and believing that Blanche has been poisoning him, they decide they want to dig up Raymond. And they do, and they were able to analyze his liver, his bones, and some tissues, and they found homicidal amounts of arsenic in Raymond. So the DA asked Cindy and her sister if they could exhume their father so they could do the same thing. And they agreed. They believed that their mother was innocent, that they weren't going to find anything. And so they agreed to have him exhumed. However, his test results came back that he had the most arsenic of all the men so far that had been tested. So he had more arsenic than any of them. So Cindy said that she thought she was living in someone's horror novel. You know, she said, this could not be my life. She couldn't wrap her head around what she was hearing, what she was learning, and she was still clinging to the hope that there was some mistake, that these men did not die because her mother poisoned them. So now we're back to the DA, assistant DA, and he's saying they exhumed 5 bodies in total, including Blanche's father, James's mother, and a couple co-workers. All but one had arsenic in their system. When they found that one body, they decided to stop. They thought there was probably more, but they didn't need to keep doing. They had all this information. So I'll admit that when this part of the episodes came up, I was so confused because I'm still in the time frame of now where Blanche is married to Dwight. Dwight's in the hospital. He's been poisoned. They're finding this out. But now we do some backtracking, right? And Blanche's father comes into the picture, and I was really confused when they brought this in, and they did a very bad job of explaining why they brought it in. But it says that when they exhumed Blanche's father, and it was found that he had arsenic, it triggered a memory in Cindy. So that's why we go back. So we learned that Blanche didn't have a great relationship with her father, and I will get into this a little bit more when I do my own little sleuthing. And one day out of the blue, when Blanche and James were married. So we're back when Cindy was little. Her father shows up at the door. So now he's at the house and he wants to talk to Blanche. And Blanche does not want to talk to him. But James kind of convinces her to go ahead, talk to him. He's come over. It has to be something important, whatever. So she does. She talks to him. Cindy said it was really odd because she was never introduced. She never got to meet her grandfather. He wasn't allowed to talk to her. She wasn't allowed to talk to him. The whole thing, he was there. He was gone. And then before long, he was dead. I don't have an explanation on the mother-in-law or the co-workers, so I want to try to hope to get a little bit of something when I do that, but I want to tell you it was not much luck. So on July 18th, 1989, yes, I thought the time frame was wrong there for a minute. Okay, so let's start that over. July 18th, 1989, Blanche was charged with murdering her father, Cindy's father, James, Raymond, and poisoning Dwight, who still lived. He survived. So she's got 2 murders and the poisoning. So Blanche pled her innocence the whole time. She never wavered. She was innocent. Oh, woe is me. The world was so awful to her. This is, pretty much what she does. I mean, it's never her fault. She never does anything wrong. It's always somebody else. But Cindy said her life changed, as any of us can imagine. I mean, seriously, come on. Of course her life changed. And she was no longer Cindy. She was now Blanche's daughter. And everywhere she went, it took a toll on her. And it was really hard for her to get on with her life. She said, especially, as I mentioned before, all the videos that kept resurfacing of her and her sister, they kept coming out every time someone would do a story on Blanche. Those kept coming out. And let me tell you, and I do mention a few of them, there are quite a few stories that are done on Blanche in this, what happened. So Blanche was only 56 when she was arrested and went to trial. So I can tell you more at the end, but I'm like, okay, she was very young when she married James. So she was 20-ish. With him for 22 years. She was 40, then 7. I still didn't have the math completely done in my head for her to be 56. So she was only convicted of murdering Raymond and poisoning Dwight. So the DA's strategy was, because they were really worried about the evidence, because nobody really ever saw Blanche put the medicine or the arsenic in the food. But they did have some good things. I mean, for one, the day she took the cake to the hospital workers for doing such a good job of taking care of Raymond, every one of them got sick, except for one person who wasn't there and didn't eat. Everybody that ate that cake got flu-like symptoms and became extremely ill. So they had, some proof. And, they had Dwight who lived through it, and there was records of Blanche showing up at the hospital to feed her sick husband or boyfriend, and they were afraid that it wouldn't stick because nobody said that she clearly did it, right? Or they never saw her clearly putting the arsenic in the food. So they were afraid that if they tried her for all of them and she got off due to, not having enough evidence, they run into double jeopardy, right? So if she's found innocent for these murders, they can't try her again. So they only tried her for Raymond and then the poisoning of Dwight. And then if they needed to, they would try her again for James. And then, of course, she was found guilty, so they didn't have to. But Cindy thinks when her mother took the stand in her own defense, and we saw video of this, she sealed her own fate. She was very cold. There was no humility. There was such an attitude when she was on the stand. And Cindy said they did this for 3 days, and she really thinks she sealed her own fate those 3 days that she took the stand in her own defense. So she received the death penalty in November 1990, and as of the date that this was filming, so remember this was January of 2018, she was still on death row. So she was still alive as 2018, and I will do an update and let you know her current standing. So Cindy ends this episode saying that after her mother went to prison, she really just wanted to be Cindy again. She wanted to be her own person. I believe she married, she had kids, but she wanted to be for them and not her mother's shadow. She says, when you think of a serial killer, you think of somebody who cannot, that was dysfunctional in society, that could not get along. They struggled. And her mother was not that. Her mother was very functional and very successful in society. She's not somebody that you would typically say, oh my God, that's a serial killer. It has to be her. She said, the signs of someone being a serial killer or someone hurting someone are not always there. And if you just don't question it, if you don't look past the obvious, you can live with a serial killer your whole life and not know it. Yeah, that's pretty hard. That is pretty deep, seriously, because that's exactly what happened to her. So let's look at the internet. So my first stop is usually Wikipedia, so we'll just start at Wikipedia, right? We'll just go ahead. We find out Blanche was born February 17th, 1933, and lived in North Carolina. So all this took place, I believe, in North Carolina. So let's talk about Daddy, Blanche's daddy. So her father's name was Parker, and they had a really troubled past. So Parker was a mill worker and an ordained Baptist minister and a womanizer. Well, okay. I truly believe that some men just need to have that after their, so Parker Kiser, womanizer, should be. I've known some men, could tell you stories, that should just have it after their name because it's what they are, it's who they are, and they are proud of it. Sorry, I should just step right off that soapbox. Okay, so Blanche says that he was an alcoholic, and later, she didn't say how old she was, but he forced her into prostitution to pay for his gambling debts. He does seem like such a peach, doesn't he? His official death was ruled as a heart attack, and I'm pretty sure that probably changed after they exhumed him and found the arsenic. Blanche married, instead of trying to say those in the same word, Blanche married James in 1952, and she was 19 years old. And they had 2 daughters, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, and it states that Blanche worked at Kroger's while married to James. So before it said that Blanche and Raymond worked together, now we know they worked together at Kroger. And it states here, that was weird. I knew I did that. It states here that in 1962, she started her affair with Raymond while she was still married. So he was a manager at Kroger, and they were still having their affair in 1973 when James died, which was only 7 years after Blanche's own father, Parker, died. And it was also ruled that James had a heart attack, if you remember. So after James' death, Blanche and Raymond dated until 1985, when, and I quote, the relationship soured, end quote. Whatever that means. Again, don't get me on my soapbox. So, Raymond was hospitalized in April of 1986, and the doctors thought he had shingles. So this is probably the spots that he had on his neck that he was showing Cindy to try to get, to see if she knew what it was and if it looked bad. So, of course, she wasn't a doctor, she didn't know. But he died in the hospital in 1986, so that October. He went in April, died in October. He was there for 6 months. And think about it. He was there that whole time, and she's probably poisoning him every time she came. So he would start to get better, she would poison him. He would start to get better. I mean, it was a freaking long time. So something that's not mentioned in this story, and kind of just goes to the character of Blanche. And it's kind of hard to... The timelines are really funky to me, but I think I get it at the end. So I'll tell you what this is, and then we'll work on, and then we'll figure this timeline out. So Blanche began dating a guy named Roger, who was the regional manager for Kroger. And that relationship didn't last long. And once they split, Blanche filed sexual harassment charges against him and Kroger, which led to him being fired and her winning $275,000 from the settlement, which that's a lot of money now, but back in the 80s, that would have been a ton of money. It said that this happened a year after Raymond died. But then it says that Blanche met Reverend Moore on Easter Sunday shortly after Raymond died. So the timelines are really, really weird, and I think I figured it out at the end. But I will say something I didn't mention, that one of the reasons they were really brought attention to Blanche in Raymond's murder is because while he was sick, and I might mention this, I really don't know. I'm just going ahead of myself, and I'm going to tell you. When he was sick, she took a lawyer in to have him sign papers that gave her a third of his estate because she was having some serious money problems. So, and the reason I mention that is because she sued for the $275,000. I'm thinking it was all right in there. She was struggling for money. She was looking for something. Okay, so Blanche and Dwight were married in 1989. And it was shortly after their honeymoon that Dwight became ill. So, I mean, they weren't married long when she was having a fit about having to share her house with him and not liking, when she complained to Cindy, to now he's ill. So, she wasn't going to wait in the past. There was no 17 years for this dude. She was done with him immediately. Okay. So, I'm reading that when he got sick, Blanche told the doctors that Dwight had been working in the yard with a herbicide, and then he got sick. So she was trying to, give a little excuse on why his toxicology reports were wrong. But his results showed he had 20 times the lethal dose of arsenic in his system. Now, remember when I said that Assistant DA said he had the most arsenic in his system than any living patient at that time, and I'm sure it's not much different now in the 2020s, but to that point in the 80s, he had more arsenic than anybody found living. And the police were involved after finding that in the toxicology report, which I would have said if they weren't involved after finding that, there was some serious problems. So, in 1993, author Jim Schutz wrote a book about Blanche titled Preacher's Girl. And it seems that Schutz later found some evidence that Blanche set up the regional manager at Kroger for the sexual harassment suit. So, she set him up, got him fired, got the money, and he really didn't do anything. I don't know. I didn't read the book. You check it out. There was some movies made about her, too. 1993 was a made-for-TV movie starring Elizabeth Montgomery, Miss Bewitched herself, that was made about Blanche, titled Black Widow Murders, the Blanche Taylor Moore story. Other TV shows or stories done about Blanche. Case File, True Podcast, covered the story on their Case 66, The Black Widow. Discovery Channel series, The New Detectives. Series 4, episode 6 is titled Women Who Kill, and it features Blanche. And then Snap, season 27, episode 6 is about Blanche. And I'm going to try to tag as many of those as I can below. Now, let's look at Murderpedia, because y'all know I like me some Murderpedia. On here, we do find out she's classified as a serial killer. She had anywhere from 1 to 4 victims, which, her dad, her mother-in-law, her husband, and her boyfriend. So, but she was convicted of the one, and then the poisoning. She is accused of killing her father, P.D. Kiser, her mother-in-law, Isla Taylor, her husband, James Taylor, and her boyfriend, Raymond Reed. And it looks like she is still on death row, which I'm going to check into that because that's kind of impressive. I find an article in the Cinemaholic that says before Blanche's trial even began, she was sitting in jail waiting for her trial, and she received a letter that was from a man named Garvin Thomas, and stated that he was responsible for the poisonings because he was in love with her. So he had to kill her suitors. But, so the letter obviously caused some setback because there had to be investigation, right? But due to handwriting experts, it was proven to be false, a fake letter that Blanche wrote herself. It was obviously left out of the story, but that just tells you she's devious, like really devious. So on a site called My Crime Library, it states that Blanche is still an active inmate as of 2022 and is currently 88 years old. So then I find out the police got suspicious of Blanche when they found out she had tried to get Dwight Moore pension. This is what I was mentioned before. She went to get his pension changed and be the principal beneficiary. In the story, it said that she had changed to be 1/3 to get a third of the estate. I think he had children. It never really states. Here it said the principal beneficiary, so she would have been the number one. So she lied about how much money she received from Raymond's estate. And during interviews, Blanche mentioned, and this just she's a piece of work, that both Dwight and Raymond had become very depressed, and had probably taken the arsenic themselves. She was innocent. They were depressed. They took it themselves. What was she supposed to do? Additionally, it emerged that Moore had been sleeping with Raymond around the same time she began dating Dwight. So again, she likes to be in this one relationship and she carries on the next one. This one dies. And she's got this relationship. She's bringing this one in and this one dies. She's got a program. She's just got us this way she does it. Blanche had cut Dwight's hair while he was in the hospital, so they couldn't use his hair samples to run toxicology reports. Didn't stop them. They used his pubic hairs instead, but yeah, she was pretty nervous at that time. So Blanche is currently the oldest inmate on death row in the United States. Now, for Isla, the mother-in-law, I cannot find anything solid on this story. Nothing. So I saw that she died like the others, and when she died, they said that she had a cerebral hemorrhage, but when exhumed, they found the arsenic, but they said she died similar to the way Blanche's father died, which apparently after Blanche's father visited, and she pretty much kicked him out, she wasn't interested, she started visiting him to try to rebuild their friendship, and she would bring, or their relationship, and she would bring him food, and he died. So in a similar fashion, apparently she was visiting, taking food, and Mama-in-law died. But it states, and I'm so confused, I just wish I knew, because it states Blanche really liked her mother-in-law and had very good memories of her, and when she passed away, she was tore up and just distraught. So what caused her to snap? What happened that made her snap and go after Isla? It never states. I don't think anybody knows. The only person that knows is probably Blanche. She ain't gonna tell us. So this is the story of the truly horrific Blanche Kiser Taylor Moore and the people who suffered and died just because they loved her. I hope you've enjoyed this story. I know I've had a couple of where I tripped over myself, and I apologize. I know I'm also mashing my walls. I forget, and I try not to do that, and I still do that. So, you know, it's all right. The story's what matters, right? Anyways, thank you for, again, stopping in, sitting with me while we discussed another evil person or story. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. It means the world to me. And until next time, guys, goodbye.